Good morning, Gwen. We have
Yes.
four board members, so we can start the meeting anytime you're ready.
Okay. Let me get back to the top. Good morning. Welcome to the Nevada State Board of Cosmetology Board Meeting. Today is November 2nd, 2020. Can we begin with the roll call with the board members?
Board Member Harris present.
Board Member Douglas present.
Victoria Negretti present.
Okay, so can I have Gwen Bramo, board member? Can we have staff, please?
Gary Landry, Executive Director, present.
Leah Easter, Chief Compliance Officer, present.
Andrew Helms, Chief Financial Officer.
Adam Higginbotham, Deputy Executive Director.
Any other staff?
Michelle Fanning, Inspector.
David Scarpelli, Inspector.
Rodney Moore, Inspector.
And then Board Chair Bramo, it looks like Vice President Baltazar just joined. So I have him marked as present as well.
Okay,
Okay.
so you're gonna mark him present, Leah?
Yep, I've got him.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so the mission of the Nevada State Board of Cosmetology is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of those that obtain cosmetology-related services through the delivery of quality testing, licensing, inspection, and education services that focus on consumer protection. Agenda item number C, are there any comments from the general public for discussion only? The board will entertain comments, must be limited to 3 minutes or less. It could be any item that is or is not published on the agenda related to the Nevada State Board of Cosmetology. No action can be taken on those matters. Comment should be limited to 3 minutes. Do we have any comments from any public participant? No? Okay, agenda item number D.
Board Member Stanton just entered, so I have her marked as present as well.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Agenda item number D, approval of minutes from the previous meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the October 12th board meeting board minutes for the last October 12th meeting?
The October 12th meeting.
Yes.
This is Board Member Douglas. I approve October 12th board member. What am I doing? The meetings?
Yes, the minutes.
The minutes, I'm sorry.
Can you restate that, board member?
Oh, Board Member Douglas, October 12th minutes. I approve.
Can I get a second to approve the minutes for October 12th?
Board Member Harris, I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So today we're going to be discussing the for possible action, the identifying the risk in beauty services. So board members, there were a draft that was presented in your packet and a presentation that was given by our deputy director in October. So I want to open up the meeting with allowing, I seem like Adam is ready to to maybe make some comments for us before we have any board discussion? Okay, Deputy.
Thank you, Madam President. Adam Higginbotham for the record. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I have a document that I'll briefly share that gives a background information or overview of what led to the document and its importance in other areas. So I'll share the screen one moment. Okay, can you see the screen in front of you that says background information risk document?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So before reviewing the risk document today, I wanted to provide a little more background information to describe its importance and its development. In 2011 or in 2012, occupational licensing reform began getting on the government regulators' radar. I attended a conference in South Carolina, and we listened to the beauty service industry government liaison communicate that the federal government discovered as a result of the 2008 financial crisis that the beauty service industry and state authorities have developed legislation and processes that inadvertently establish barriers of entry into the profession. This was discovered when the displaced workers from the financial crisis could not transition into professions that required an occupational license without time off work or additional expenses. Some of the barriers identified were the state authorities' application processing times took too long. State license mobility, meaning reciprocity issues from transferring one state to another. There were also some pre-testing credentials that were talked about at some level. There were obstacles for special populations, such as applicants with criminal history, new immigrants, minorities, and military members. And there were also national inconsistencies that were identified where there were license titles inconsistencies, scopes of practice, and entry requirements, along with the student cohort default rates. These were just some of the issues that were, or obstacles that were talked about to government legislators in the 2011-2012 timeframe of regulations that were coming. After that, after that meeting, we saw a decade of deregulation bills. In the past decade, there have been many bills introduced across the country at the state level and at the federal level in an attempt to deliver solutions to some of the obstacles. Some states have attempted to deregulate a licensed profession or slice out a major service from a main license in order to create a specialty license. Some of the deregulation bills that we started seeing across the country were all over the place, and it was hard to learn the key talking points to better position the Nevada State Board of Cosmetology so we did not encounter the similar situations that other states experienced. Not all of the bills negatively impacted the beauty service industry. But it strengthened it. However, there are some bills that could adversely impact the consumer if the beauty service professional is not trained in the delivery of the service and on how to mitigate the risks. So some bills were passing without the thought of where the risks were to consumers and with an adequate amount of communication to the legislators of what those risks were. In 2015, we saw the U.S. Supreme Court ruling against North Carolina Dental Board, which the board acted in self-interest to protect their revenue streams for dentists. We saw that take place, and that didn't help the state of occupational licensing reform, and we saw additional deregulation bills towards the latter of the decade. In 2016, after different attempts, we started to learn, based on observing national trends, a better way of establishing a dialogue with the legislators to communicate why the beauty service industry professional, or why the beauty service professionals need a license, but there wasn't much content developed. And no industry association had consistent material to support licensing, which was what was the topic of occupational licensing reform. Then in 2017, we read Nevada's Senate Bill 69. And after reading that, it's like the light bulb went off on how to communicate where the risks are that could hurt the consumer. And that's how we started the project. Now we're in occupational licensing reform. And what occupational licensing reform is, it examines licensed professionals and the various barriers of entry. This licensing reform isn't going away. Nevada is one of the 11 states that participated in a national occupational licensing symposium that was paid for through federal grants. We believe that the information in this document can improve the dialogue between the industry and the legislators should the industry in Nevada face bills that may attempt to deregulate services or licenses without first identifying the consumer's risk. And the key point of this document is the consumer's risk, which is the whole reason why the legislature created us in 1931, which was to help mitigate those risks. And that's all that I have for right now. I think Leslie Rosti she'll communicate briefly of how this document is beneficial in her role as she speaks to legislators throughout the whole country, not just Nevada.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me back. It was really interesting when I listened to your meeting the last time we were here, talking about what your concerns were about this document. And I think that maybe we're looking at, we need to change the perspective on how you're looking at this document. It's really a document that does not pose a risk to the industry. It doesn't put you at more risk of potentially not being able to do services or any of those types of things. I know there was concern expressed for people that have been cosmetologists for a long number of years, and this might negatively impact them. I think what you need to look at it is this is actually beneficial to the industry. I've been listening around the country, what's been going on during COVID. I suspect that regardless of what happens tomorrow in the election, that by February 1st, I suspect we will have hundreds of deregulation bills that are attempting to deregulate cosmetology and barbering across the country. This has been a very bipartisan effort to reduce occupational licensing, the barriers to people being able to be employed. We're seeing these high numbers of unemployment with COVID, people that need to be reemployed in other industries. And I think that all of that's going to play into the hand of the deregulation bills. So rather than looking at this as something that could hurt the industry, I think we need to look at this document as the one thing that can save this industry, being a licensed profession. Because if I have to go to a state, whether it's Nevada or any other state, and be able to say, the only reason a cosmetologist has a license anywhere in America is because you pose a risk to a consumer. If there was no risk involved, you wouldn't have a license. Anybody could do it. And so if I now have objective data that can say, this is what the risk is, this is how somebody could be injured, it now makes a case for, even if it's not complete licensure, at least partial licensure. And I think in some states, that's what they're going to be facing, potentially deregulating or deregulating parts of what is currently in the scope of a cosmetologist or barber's practice. So I think that you need to turn around the way you're looking at this and look at it as a protective factor for the cosmetologists and barbers rather than something that's going to hurt the industry.
Thank you. I sound like I'm echoing. Okay. Do I have, and I appreciate you, Ms. Rosti, for your presentation this morning, and I truly understand deregulation. I've been in the industry for a while, and I've sat in a lot of those sessions with the legislators. So I was kind of there, like during the hair braiding here in our state, very instrumental in trying to put some type of regulation to that. because I kind of knew where that direction, where it was going. So I do respect that. I respect our board and all their hard work. I like the document, actually. There's just some things that I had questions about. I think it's a much needed document because I think it's to say that we need license for these particular services that's going to be performed. But I do have questions, and I'll let the board members go with their questions first, because I think that's kind of only fair to them. So do we have any other, I know we have probably some questions, I'm not sure from last time, but do we have any board members that would like to ask their questions? And this, I think this is the time to get things clarified and get things worked out so that we can move forward.
Brian Baltazar, I don't necessarily have a question, but I just wanted to thank you all for working on this document. I think it does legitimize the reasoning to defend licensing. And you are correct, regardless of what happens tomorrow. I think we are going to see a much more increased effort to deregulate. And so this really articulates well for those that have the power to deregulate why it may not be in the best interest of the public. So I just wanted to thank you all for this document.
Thank you, Board Member Baltazar. Do we have any other board members that have any questions or concerns?
This board member Douglas, I agree with Brian on everything he said. And I think this is a serious development that we're looking into and should be, I think, examined as soon as possible. So, or voted on. Because I want to protect my license. And the people that's coming in, if they're just coming in easily, I mean, like Foster said, I mean, what's the purpose of having a license? So that's my take on it.
Thank you, Board Member Douglas. Any other board members have any questions, concerns? This is the time.
This is Kai Sianton, Madam President, if I may. I do have a lot of concerns, and here's one of them. If this is just highlighting risk, we're only talking about risk, almost on the same line as highlighting like OSHA. For example, one of the things that were highlighted was chemical relaxers. Let's talk about that. Sodium hydroxide is the risk, not the chemical relaxer process. This is going through step-by-step in process, which will also be a support for citations and other things to lean on. That's not really to highlight a service and not the risk is probably problematic in the formation of how it's being read. So it's very important that we highlight the product being utilized as if OSHA or someone else would do so, not so much the service in which it's being done. For example, sodium hydroxide and thioblockade are relaxers, but two totally different strands and formulations. Utilizing them both together can create combustion and create the hair to fall off, melt off, etc., which will create a chemical reaction. So if we're highlighting that, we should not be highlighting the services, because now you get into what products, X, Y, and Z. We have to be careful about that. The other thing I noticed that some of the things were highlighted, and I'm trying to look for those particular ones right now, is one of them, blow dry and thermal ironing together. Kind of doesn't make sense. Then there's some other things on there that's a full breakdown. That's a little concerning. What you're doing is highlighting services and not so much the risk. And then you're taking the breakdown of those risks and saying, this is what we're looking for when you look for the breakdown, as well as almost like a form of an MSDS sheet. And the MSDS sheet is already in there for the breakdown of the formulation and how it's being utilized. So why are we doing that again through presenting something through legislation, which is not highlighting risk, it's highlighting services? So if that formation and that information can be changed, that would be great. Also, we do not have some of the licensings that are listed here. There is no wax licensing. There are some other licensings that we do not have. As of right now, like I said before, we're not in jeopardy of deregulation. That is not the conversation. And also, if we look into the regulation of 69, that's actually highlighting some of the feeds. And if we can pull that up, I'm hoping everyone on the board actually looked at that, the SB 69 that was presented in 2016, as well as 2017. That's also communicating fees, and it's communicating other regulatory, which was the highest highlight of that regulatory, and he's discussing fees in that particular bill. So that's something that we really need to look at and research. And as far as when we say risk, I understand where the confusion came from when we're talking about risk, because it is highlighting the chemicals that we're utilizing and not the services. And so when we're doing that, we need to make sure that we're not, how do I say, tying our hands because of what something looks good and things have not been thoroughly investigated and fully looked at regarding what we're highlighting and how we're highlighting them. For example, when you pull up, once again, chemical relaxer, and then also I want to talk about eyelashes. Notice the eyelash adhesive is not on there. There's some eyelash adhesive that needs to be named that burns your eyes. Currently, I have had my eyelashes done several times, and sometimes that burning solution just burns. Not everyone utilizes the same product, but the formulation in which they use that particular product, there is a particular formula in there that causes that reaction. That needs to be highlighted. Not so much the services and X, Y, and Z and steps, because once again, it's a little contradicting when we're saying by instructor's manual, and then at the bottom, it turn around and says, you need to utilize, and I'm going back to relaxers, because that was the number one. Number 6 was the number one. That was the highest of all that was highlighted. Okay, that was the only 6 that was on there. So that's why I'm addressing that one. It says neutralizer, and then a shampoo neutralizer, and then another step. Well, shampoo and neutralizer are the same thing. And so when you're utilizing a neutralizer, you're highlighting neutralizer, that's totally one step. And then you turn around and say neutralizing shampoo. If I'm an inspector, I'm looking for your neutralizer and your neutralizer shampoo and your other step. That doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. So we have to be careful about how we're breaking things down in services and what we're sincerely looking at, as well as I don't see anything regarding fees and regulatory, is, which is highlighted in SB 69. I don't see that in there. We're mainly just highlighting certain services, not so much the risk, and that's where the concern is coming in at.
Madam
I do
President,
appreciate. I think it's great. I'm sorry. I'm going to finish. I apologize,
Are there
Adam.
questions involved, Madam President?
I'm sorry. What were you saying, Adam?
Are there questions involved? I'm trying to make note of all the topics, and we're losing track here.
Well, you're losing track. I apologize if you're losing track, Adam. Let me reiterate once again so that no one loses track. So what I'm saying is, let's highlight risk and not service. That's my point. And the examples I utilized was the highest risk that was placed on there, which was a number 6, chemical relaxer. Okay, so I'm going to make my next statement. Eyelash adhesive, eyelash extensions is at a 0. When they're utilizing the eyelash adhesive, there should be a number there as well on the risk factor. So
Can I answer you really quick? Can I answer just really quickly? Because I'm not losing track. I just want to answer it as it comes up. So I know that you're talking about the products. That's one of the big things that you're having a concern about. And as you might guess, there are so many products out there. It was really,
and I'm so sorry, Leslie, it's not
overwhelming. It would have been
services.
Hold on, I can't hear you.
Products.
We're muted here. I can't hear her. Sorry, we have 2 computers in the same room, so I didn't hear you. What did you say?
That's okay. It's okay. It's not products. It's the formulation. That's why we're highlighting.
I understand what you're saying. So, but what I wanted to say is the whole purpose of following through with this service, the actual steps of the service, was that part of it is picking the right product and then using it properly. If either of those things are done incorrectly, if you don't pick the right product, let's say you pick the eyelash extensive adhesive, the eyelash adhesive that is dangerous, you've picked the wrong product, right? And that might be a next step in this project to go through all the formulations and figure all of that out. But in this beginning, it was pick the right product and use it properly. Let's all agree, some people pick the right product and they still don't use it properly. They'll take a product that says don't apply heat and they apply heat, right? So that makes something that wasn't dangerous, dangerous. And so that was where all those steps come in. And I'm not sure where you're seeing that eyelash adhesive doesn't have, I know for a fact we went round and round with the eyelash adhesive about how dangerous it is. So I'm not sure, I may be not seeing what you're seeing on that. Can you know what page you're on the report?
Yeah, there's a couple of, if you look on the full breakdown where it highlights all of the risk and then it
So
breaks
on
down
page
in point
18, is that the one
system.
you're looking at? Because that's where I see the 6 on chemical relaxer in terms of product risk. And there's
Yes,
a
you'll see
4
the
for
number.
eyelash extension risk. So that's addressing that risk of a bad product, let's say, or a poorly formulated product. I think we attempted to address that risk there.
Gwen Bremo, board member, I think what one of my questions was also to, and maybe I don't know who should answer this, but on page 9, I'm gonna go back to page 9 where board member Stanton, I think she got the information because I reviewed this pretty much in depth over the weekend. And I do like the document, but I think there can be some slight modifications to it, and then we can move forward with it. I think it's great for the purpose that it's intended. So I want to be clear, okay? I think this is some of maybe the miscommunication with the document, because if we probably, and I hate this, I wish we would have had the opportunity to look at the document prior to last meeting, because I don't like, what I don't like for us to do as a board is to continue to go back and forth. So if we could clear up some things today, I think it would, we could be able to move forward with this document, in my opinion. I'm just one vote. But on page 9, and now correct me if I'm wrong, when it talks about licenses and registrations, Deputy Director, I think this might be a question for you. It talks about the registration and other licensings derived from one main license. So from aesthetics, we're gonna derive to an eyelash technician license, a makeup artist license, a wax special license. I'm confused about that part there, because if we're going to submit this document, if this is going to be regulation, or is this is a document that we're going to present to legislators? I think that's kind of where I'm kind of confused. Does this go to legislators, or is this something that we're going to be referencing as a manual for us, and in the future we would like to maybe add some additional licensings? Because I don't want us to, I really didn't want to see something there that we don't have currently. You know, we don't have an eyelash technician license, and I know this for sure, that we've had multiple individuals to come before our board because in other states they didn't need license for that, and they would like to practice that particular they would have to practice that particular service in our state. Would this allow them at this time to be able to I'm confused at where we're going. If I know where we're going, then I could better understand, you know, what this information is, because I think it's great for us to have, and for you, Miss Leslie, for you to take across the country to speak on our behalf, and the other around the country, because I mean, basically, when we do things, we do them regionally, and we try to sometimes pull information nationally. So if I could get a better understanding of where we're going with this, that would help.
Madam President, for the record, Adam Higginbotham, Deputy Director. That one paragraph on page 9, and I'll read it out. Licenses, registrations in aesthetics, hair design, and nail technology derived from cosmetology's scope of practice. Legislative trends of establishing niche or specialty licenses or registrations from aesthetics, hair design, and nail technology have occurred throughout the United States. A few of the more recently developed licenses, registration types deriving from aesthetics, hair design, and nail technology are blow dry technician, eyelash technician, hair braider, makeup artist, shampoo technician, threader, and waxing specialists. Some of these license types we have already seen developed in the Nevada market. This paragraph is only communicating the national trends of the deregulation movement. And as the opening statement that I had in my slide that I communicated, some of the states are deregulating services within a scope completely, or they're taking it out and creating a license, a registration, or a specialty license. All we're saying, this trend is happening as a result of occupational licensing reform. This document is only for the industry to say, should they experience a bill that is non-industry supported or non-industry submitted to the legislature, with this document, we can now say, hold off. There are some risks in waxing, and here's where all these risks are. That way we fend off any complete giving up any training, because there are consumer risks. And this document is educating the legislature that these services are not just beauty and vein related. If these services are done improperly, they can permanently hurt someone or cause disfiguration, or they can cause a long-lasting issue that will take a while to be to overcome, whether it's an infection risk, a malpractice or a safety risk, or a product reaction risk. In the Board of Cosmetology, our focus is on actually the service, just the service of what the license delivers. Very rarely does the board ever get involved in products. That's the FDA. That's a federal level that requires a whole different set of licensing and manufacturing, which Leslie can speak to the complexities of that, which that's nowhere in our wheelhouse to address. And the only occurrence that I ever know of boards addressing a product was a few years ago, the Brazilian blowout that had a high amount of formaldehyde in the product. That's the only time I know that states have been guided to communicate to the licensed professionals about a product. And that came from the FDA. So that's kind of both.
You too, Deputy. I don't mean to cut you off. Are you still talking? Go right ahead. I don't mean to cut you off.
Oh, I'm done.
Okay, so I have another question. So I get the intent of the document. I just want to be clear that is this document for informational purposes, or is this document will be submitted for us to regulate our industry, or is this document considered as NRS? Or is this just where is this document going?
This is just a report to go to the Legislative Council Bureau, which they're not the legislators. They're a team of attorneys that review and draft legislation.
LCBD.
So the reason why it's going to them is because they're the ones that draft regulation should they get pressure from the legislature, or should there be federal grants such as occupational licensing reform topics should they get a byproduct of occupational licensing reform. And let's say that that group, which the industry doesn't have a say in, that group will submit legislation to the LCB.
Okay.
We're saying this document is here to make sure the LCB has the industry's say of where the consumer's risks are. The document is purely focused on, if you're going to deregulate, you might need to look at the risk, because there are risks to the consumer. And if you deregulate a service without looking at the consumer risks, it's not going to be in the best interest of the public, because you're going to have untrained individuals not knowing how to administer the product while delivering the service. And if they make an error with the product application throughout the service delivery, that product could not only cause a product reaction should they not ask the proper consultation questions beforehand, but it also causes a risk to the consumer if the product is not used the way the manufacturer's label has instructed. If it's left on processing a lot longer than it should be, then that's going to cause a chemical burn that's going to severely adversely affect the consumer.
Okay.
I think one of the other things that we do see happen in other states, and I think this is really just really preparing yourselves from, we all watched football yesterday, offense and defense, just being prepared as we go forward, is that a bill will come to a state that is a deregulatory bill. And then we see everyone in that state scrambling to say, what can we do to rebut this argument? What can we do to rebut the argument of a bunch of very well-organized people who literally go around this country and just introduce these bills in every state? They're very well organized. They're mostly groups of attorneys who have a lot of resources at their disposal. And it's all they do is try to go out and write occupational licensing deregulatory bills. It's their belief system. And so many states get caught without the information they need to rebut these. And this is your moment as a state, being the first state to already develop the rebuttal information to say, well, here's why we can't completely deregulate cosmetology. We've already done all the work. And it took 2 years. So most states wouldn't have the time to gather that information in the course of a bill working its way through your legislature. So I don't see it as something that was ever intended to be part of your regulations, just something to rebut a potential bill that could be introduced.
Okay.
Madam President, this is Kai. I would like to finish my statement. Thank you. My statement is, once again, Adam just supported what I said. The delivery of the services and the breakdown, if they're not applied right, this is what will happen. So it is determined on how this is being applied. So if we have someone coming in and Kelly is doing a relaxer, which does not require the steps that are in front of her, that could be a citation, that could be a problem, even though that is not her manufacturer's process. So what I'm asking for is, when we're talking about process and each steps in which we're highlighting to protect consumer services, that we are not boxing ourselves in a corner and stating, this is process. This is the proper way to apply. Because like I said, this is how it's read.
If I'm hearing you correctly, I think what you're saying, I didn't hear it the first time. I think what you're saying is—
That's why I wanted to finish my statement.
That's why I'm trying to get to the right place. Is what you're saying is there's not only one way to do it. There's multiple ways to do certain things, and that all those ways aren't addressed. So,
and if we do not, we have to be very clear when we're coming before people that have never done a service before, step foot in a salon. We have to be very clear that we're protecting our very public and the very people that are utilizing the tools in which this agency is the whole reason why they exist. And if we box them into a corner, not understanding the documentation and the ramifications, what could happen, because, as we all know, seats change and positions change in all areas. And so we need to make sure that the narrative of the information is very clear. So no matter who is where, they understand what is taking place and why these steps are in place and what they're looking at. There are
So when
some
it-
information that is problematic, and that's why I was stating not product. And I think that's where the narrative is confusing. I'm not stating state the actual name of a company. It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, just like if OSHA says there is a large amount of formaldehyde in this product, formaldehyde can cause X, Y, and Z. Why does not the document state that way versus stating this is the service, these are the steps?
Right, so would it be more acceptable to you if we were talking about, let's say, a chemical application, I'm making this up off the top of my head, if we said apply chemical relaxer as directed by manufacturer, so now we're putting that back on, we don't have to know all the formulations, because as you just said, all the formulations always change all the time. We would just get this document done, and then there would be some company that came up with some new type of relaxer or some type of adhesive, that kind of thing. So it'd be impossible to keep the document current. So if we were to refer in this step then back to the manufacturer's label, would that better meet what you're looking for?
I think that's what the public's looking for. It's not just me. I think what's happening is, once again, it's already stated on there. It's already stated, but then we take it another step, which looks contradicting and saying this step 1, step 2, step 3, neutralizing shampoo. But then on the top, it says manufacturer's directions. If we just said, according to manufacturer's directions, these things have already been highlighted before they have already put that product out. Hence, the MSDS sheet is a requirement to have in the salons, schools, et cetera, across the board. So it should not have any further conflict as far as that, because the MSDS sheet is required to be on the premises at all times. Also, we're referring to the actual manual. We're saying also at the bottom, sodium hydroxide. This can propose a risk. This is a product that is utilized across the board in particular products. Thiogloccate is utilized across the board in a lot of those products. So because we're highlighting those risks, we're still not painting ourselves in a corner by stating these are the steps that we're looking for. Because like you said, there's so many products. This industry is forever changing. How do we lock that information in without getting into that level of conflict? And I think that's the best way to approach it for the public in general.
The product is only identified as a risk if it poses a skin irritation, allergic reaction. That's where the product reaction comes into play. Leaving the chemical on the scalp for too long, that would come into play for the malpractice and safety. That's where malpractice and safety risk would be associated with that, because it requires both practical and theoretical knowledge for the student or for the beauty professional. Needs practical and theoretical knowledge to be able to use that chemical within the service. So what this document is saying is not necessarily that this product is bad and it causes issues. It's if the beauty professional is not properly trained in how to use this chemical within providing the actual service, that's where the risk is. This whole document is going back to communicate the importance of practical and theoretical knowledge in order to deliver these services safely. And the practical and theoretical knowledge mitigates the risk in infection control because they've had theoretical knowledge in how to mitigate infection control and practical knowledge in how to actually deliver infection control.
Can I
say?
Go right ahead, Deputy. I'll speak after you.
And then the malpractice and safety risk is identified if a student doesn't know how to do the permanent wave service or chemical relaxer service. And if they don't have the practical knowledge of how to deliver that service and the practical and theoretical knowledge on how to apply the product, then they can pose a malpractice and safety risk. It's reconfirming this document is for attorneys. It's not for the beauty service industry per se. It's for attorneys that are drafting legislation so they can look at this document and say, okay, there are risks in this area. And they don't need to know the exact details of the industry or how to perform the service, because that's the educator's role in the schools, teaching people if they want to know how to do the service. We're only communicating to individuals that are attorneys of saying there are risks in this, and it's not just a club you go to learn how to make people look pretty. There are risks involved, and if you don't know how to mitigate the infection risk, the malpractice and safety risks, along with the product reaction risks, that you can severely hurt someone. And that's the whole backbone of the document. It's not to educate people on how to do the service. It's to educate that this area of the service requires practical and theoretical knowledge. It's not just someone picks up a set of shears and says, I'm a Cosmo today. It's not that. You need training. And here's a document that we're communicating to the people who are drafting the bills, so they see this risk document and see the areas of the risk, and we're educating them. That's the point of who we need to educate with this document.
Okay.
I feel a little
Thank you,
saddened to
Adam.
say,
I'm
I feel
sorry.
a little saddened to say this, but I think the people who are going to read this, really who are going to use it, aren't actually going to read the whole document. They're looking to say, have you quantified the risk sufficiently that we can rebut a bill? They aren't going to read the details, and quite frankly, they're not going to know if the details are right or wrong. One of the things I've experienced is that most of the legislators I work with have zero idea what people learn in cosmetology school. They really will say to me, well, what's the worst that can happen? It's just a bad haircut. That is what they will say. That is their viewpoint of the world, is what's the worst that can happen? A bad haircut. And I have to spend time educating them. There's a lot of bad things that can happen. There is a reason somebody goes to school. There's a reason there's a textbook. There is a reason there's a license. So this document, I think, will only ever be looked at by those legislators as that high level, oh yes, there are these risks, and they've taken the time to quantify them. So if I ever have to defend the document, it's written right here, but it's not ever gonna need to be to the specificity that we might like it, because you're really well educated in all the things you do, and you want that to be recognized in this document. But it really is a high level document intended to be a proof statement for what you teach in school and why you have a license.
Thank you. I'm so happy all of you basically just said what I said. We need to solidify the information and make sure it's very clear in what we're writing down. And because a lot of people have not encountered this industry, it's very important that we're very clear and not have confliction. So I have to look at a document as if I've never seen a acrylic or X, Y, and Z. And how does this read to me? And so once I read this, as Adam has stated, this is not to go over this information. This is left up to the instructors. But we are doing that. We are labeling step-by-steps. We are doing that to propose the highlighting of the risk. So my point is, we need to be careful about how we're doing that, and the verbiage needs to be slightly different. Documentation and making sure that our license is protected, and us moving forward and the leading of making sure this is correct, exactly why even more so we need to take a sobering look and ensure that this is correct and implement it properly. If nothing is ever read through, let's just say, with this documentation, will the inspectors be reviewing this? And will this be any support form of any kind? Or is this just something that's regulatory and informational so that it can be utilized for those that are in a salon? So if it's just informational and an inspector walks in and sees that I don't have a neutralizer, but I have a neutralizing shampoo, and I don't have a neutralizer conditioner, but I have the conditioner that follows with the manufacturers, does that warrant for something to be supported for something else? So I just want to be clear to make sure that we are utilizing this document to be just that, information to help support the understanding and to stop deregulation. If that's even a conversation, because as of now, this is not even a conversation. So if we're getting ahead of something before it even happens, I'm A-okay with that. I would rather have a flu shot versus have the full flu. So I completely understand where we're going with that. I just want to make sure, because we are, arrowheading this, that this has to be at the utmost best way we can relate this without boxing ourselves in and tying our hands and not recognizing what we have done, especially when I'm reading the SB 69, because that's highlighting what, like I said, regulatory fees and other things related to the actual licensees. It's not actually highlighting risk. So, and that was not even risk, was nowhere near in that verbiage. So I want to just make sure that the verbiage of the documentation is where it needs to be so that everyone understands across the board. So if we're saying we don't need to teach people steps, then that doesn't need to be in there. If we don't need to go over that, and we can just say refer to, just as what was stated. That's my only point. Absolutely. Thank you, Madam President.
Okay, so let me just say this, and this is kind of, hold on one second. Let me close my door. This is where I am with the document. I think the document is a much needed document. And Ms. Leslie and Deputy, thank you for clarifying it. I think it kind of brings it full circle now of the whole purpose of the document, because I think the intent is there because we have to protect our industry. And the only way that we're going to be able to protect the industry is like what you were saying, Ms. Leslie, with the high-powered attorneys coming in with lots of money, stating that we're just haircutters, and and anybody can do that, and they don't have to go to school for it. So I agree. We need a document to give to LCB, the Legislative Council Bureau, so in case that these individuals come into our state and other states, because we have to be able to defend the industry as a whole, they can say, we have 2 years of gathered information from professionals across this country. And this is the reason why they need license. I think it's an awesome document. I think where Board Member Stanton is wanting to be clear, I don't know, I'm just listening to her, is she wants to make sure that this document is not utilized in any other way. I don't think the document is going to be utilized in any other way after the discussion today. I think the document is to protect the industry. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. And one of the things that people have heard me when I speak on a national level talk about is that even if you don't have any pressing bills in your state right now, or you don't even perceive that there will be, one of the things that I talk about is marijuana legislation, which I think everybody can relate to. That 20 years ago, if I had said marijuana will be recreationally acceptable in in one state, everyone would have been like, oh no, that won't happen. But then one state did it, and it made it easier for the next state to do it. And they just start honing their argument for whatever they're for or against with every state that starts to turn the corner. And that is why, regardless of what your status is right now in Nevada, this document is important to all the states and ultimately will become important to you. You have some neighboring states that are in really big trouble with deregulation in terms of, they're not big trouble, but they have a lot of deregulation push, and they're your closest neighbors all around you. And you really have to be conscious of the fact that if those states deregulate, it does start to make the argument easier, even in the state of Nevada. And so whatever we can do to shore it up in other states, even if this document, and I don't perceive this being used in any other way than this rebuttal to deregulation. My understanding in every state and in the state of Nevada is that inspectors can only inspect based on the published rules. And this doesn't change your rules. This is a completely separate document. Your rules, if you want to change your rules, that's a whole different process than what this was. So Adam can confirm that, but I don't anticipate anybody using this document as a mechanism for citing somebody on something, because it's just your state isn't set up that way, as nobody else is either.
Thank you.
Good. So my question, Madam President, to to Mr. Higginbotham is the breakdown on each individual, and I can pull that up where it says back, and it's the very next page right after it's highlighting the numbered risk. So my question is, when we talk
I'm sorry,
about,
what page number?
I'm
What,
sorry.
what page number?
When we're going over the information, it is right under the one that says infection risk, services, infection risk. I have well, actually 3 computers going on, sorry. Let me pull this up on a bigger scale so I can pull this up. When we're going over number 17, when it's going over the full breakdown, and we're talking about beauty services info sheet. So I'm just gonna randomly hit something. So what came up? Blow drying. So if we're talking about blow drying, so why do we need to highlight, if you look all the way at the bottom, shampooing, conditioning, application? Why are we highlighting application? In all services, we've done that. We're highlighting the application of all services and not necessarily highlighting what is causing a risk or what is causing X, Y. This is in all services. I'm speaking generally because I just pushed a button. So
Are you
if
in
you
the-
will just
the
kind of work with me a little
Backside
bit.
of the, are you on the back side of the info sheets?
Yes, yes. Where it says blow dry services, it's identifying the risk in beauty services, something that everyone can print out. So it's
Okay.
almost like a packet of a breakdown, and it looks as if it's condensed nicely so that I can print off everything, every services that is within this identifying the risk, and I can hole punch them, etc. So with that, if we're just identifying the risk, why are we identifying the application?
Because we needed a baseline to create a percentage of the services, of the steps within the service that didn't pose a known risk. That way we could communicate to the legislators in numbers instead of the words, because we lose their attention in words. And like Leslie was mentioning, we only have a short period of time to educate them. And if we educate them with something that's visually pleasing, it's easy for them to see. They can see a breakdown of the risks. Okay, here's the areas of an infection risk. Here's the area of a malpractice and safety risk. Here's the area of the product reaction risks. It allows them to take away from looking at this document, there are 3 risks, regardless of the service. They're reading this going, okay, well, there's a consumer risk for infection, malpractice and safety, and then there's the product reaction risk. So we needed that number, or that percentage, to help with our visual. Yeah.
I was also going to add something in there. I hate to say this because I'm not just lumping at all legislators into one group, but still in 2020 in America, the vast majority of legislators are men. And they don't ever access any of these services. So their ability to have an understanding of the application, let's say, of a chemical that might create might burn my skin, that is a very foreign concept to them. The actual application of, they don't think that process through, right? They look at a woman and they say, oh, she's got beautiful hair. They don't think what went into all of that concept. So unfortunately, we have to make it really easy and quick. They don't have the palette for us to give them more education. We'd love to, but they don't have the time or the bandwidth. Most legislators actually don't even read these types of documents. They have an aide read them, and then the aide sort of gives them a little digested version. And the aide might say something as simple as, this document says there are risks in all these services, and so we now can support going against this bill, right? We can rebut this bill. And it might be as simple as a text message, you know? And so we're trying to squish it down, but still get all the numbers in. So that's why it looks so elementary maybe, and not like we're really digging in as far as we should have.
So
that's fair.
Mm-hmm. So Gwen Bramo, board member. So would it be fair to say the reason why we have the service application is when legislators look at this information, they know that it's a step-by-step process and it has to be something that's learned. So not something that a person would just know how to do without going by step, and they would learn this in an institution or through some type of licensing.
That is exactly right. You've got it. Because
Okay.
they may think that you can, okay, here's an argument I've heard. I literally have heard somebody from the Institute for Justice up on, speaking and saying, if my wife can go to Target and buy hair color and she doesn't burn herself, why does somebody have to go to school for 1,500 hours to apply hair color? That's the argument I hear, right? And so that legislator, that's their only frame of reference, is that their wife might go to Target and buy that boxed chemical. What they don't understand is that you went to school because you're using different chemicals. You're using much stronger chemicals. You have the ability to do a different type of job with it because you are using professional strength, but you also, if you weren't properly trained, could injure someone. You might not even understand that you have to put something to protect the skin so that if a chemical got on my skin, it might burn me, or that I have to do a scalp assessment, that I have to ask you some questions before I apply certain chemicals to your face or your hair, or even around your nail beds. So you have to consider their frame of reference, and it's very limited typically.
Okay.
So that was the perfect explanation what you gave.
Yeah, because well, now it kind of like, now I'm getting a better understanding after us, that's why it's so important that I'm glad we had this discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, because now I could, did that help you, Board Member Stanton?
Yes, because when I'm hearing deregulation and then I'm seeing steps, and then the conversation was we're highlighting risk. And when I hear risk, I'm hearing we're highlighting chemicals that are a potential risk for the public, but then I'm seeing breakdown of services. It's a little conflicting to me. So that's why it was really important. I need to understand, how is this protecting our licensees, and we are ensuring their protection and safety, et cetera. So absolutely, that helps 110%. And I appreciate everyone being patient and sustaining the professional communication, and so that the board across can understand what's happening here, because laws within regulations, within adoptions are several different beasts, and sometimes one can cross the other and then create a whole narrative, and I wanted to make sure that is not possible. So thank you for the communication. I appreciate you, Mr. Higginbotham, and also Ms. Leslie.
Okay. Is there any other questions, any other comments before we take a vote? I would like to have a vote.
This is Kai Stanton. I would like to make a motion to approve the identifying risk documentation and support that staff has presented to the board.
Can I get a second?
Board Member Douglas, I would like to second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay. Okay, so we're now to agenda item F. Is there any comments from the general public? It's a discussion only. Comments are to be limited to 3 minutes or less. Any item that's on the agenda could be discussed related to cosmetology. No action can be taken on the matter. No comment? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
This is Kai Stanton. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting for November 2nd, 2020, 9 a.m.
Can I get a second?
Board Member Harris, I second that motion.
Motion carries.
Wait,
Well, I say all in favor.
Aye.
All right. Have a nice day. Motion carries.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Aye.
you.
Board. Thank you, Miss Leslie. Thank you, staff.
I just want to
Bye-bye.
remind the board members that you have a meeting next Monday as well, on the 9th. So just be prepared.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.